بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. The Eritrean communities lived in different parts of the world, in different countries, even in different continents, Africa, Europe, Asia, North and South America, Australia. Due to the migration, many Eritreans settled in different countries and became citizens of those countries. But their background continue to influence their identities and personalities. Many people managed to lead successful life and managed to contribute positively in their societies and in different ways and in different fields. In the field of education, healthcare, business, politics, and writing, the art of writing and arts as well. They continue to excel and flourish. And some rising stars continue to shine. Those shining stars, when they find the opportunities, continue to shine from time to time, giving us some pride and some honor that our countrymen and women are excelling and providing and contributing positively. Today, we are going to enjoy meeting with one of those shining stars, Mr. Sami Said. Sami Said, a Swedish Eritrean author. He's going to talk about his life and his experience and some relevant points to us. He was born in the road to Sudan and has lived for 30 years in Sweden. He has written 2 well-received fiction books about migration and identity. He studied political science and religion at Linköping University. You might correct my pronunciation of the name. He sometimes writes for Swedish
newspaper,
second largest newspaper. We would like to welcome Brother Said, and we are here anticipating to learn and gain some to our team with education first.
Okay. I did not get exactly the last part. It was your internet was a bit unstable, but I think everyone got right. My name is Sami Said, like you said. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I actually, if you look on the internet,
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I used to say I was born in Karen, actually. And if you look at the internet, that's what it says. So it must be true. All my life,
Okay.
that's what I've known, that I was born in Karen. And then a few years back, I found out that it was just something my parents made up when we came here, because they thought it would make our story better. So they would accept me too into Sweden. To this day, they are afraid if people find out that I was not born in Karen, they will throw me out from Sweden. Thank you for letting me participate in this program. I hope you will find something of interest. If not, I'm sorry. Considering the little I know about this program, you seem to be more focused on academia and lifting our society up. And actually, I haven't been part of that for many years now. Writing is a very self-oriented, lonely activity. Most of the time, I just sit inside at my home. And the only times I leave, it's for family and to talk about my books in a library. In Sweden, every town has a library, at least one, no matter how small or big it is. And they invite writers to come and talk. That's how Swedish writers make their money. And there's always a few, sometimes three, sometimes 20 old ladies, maybe only one man, a husband who was forced to come along. Swedish culture is dependent on these 3 to 20 ladies. And afterwards, they always tell me, thank you, it was great having you here, and they give you flowers. But they also look very disappointed. Every time they look disappointed. And they say or imply somehow that they did not invite me just for their own sake. They invited me for the young immigrants. We see them on the streets doing nothing, they say. We see them in shopping malls. And we put up these posters about this event. We wanted to do something for them. So why did they not come? Where are they? So today, this is a new audience for me. I think I never been invited to speak to Eritreans before. Uh, anyway, usually the story about the writer follows a familiar pattern. It begins with suffering, trauma, uh, the trauma of living, lack of money, lack of love, lack of everything, the trauma of writing, failure, and so on. And then they finally make it. I don't like this story. I think it's probably my story, but I don't like it very much. There is a noted African American writer called James Baldwin. He once said, it seems to me that the artist's struggle for integrity is a kind of metaphor. It must be considered a metaphor for the struggle which is universal and daily of all human beings on this globe to get to become human beings. So there's nothing really special about being writer to him. It is a writer's life is the same pretty much as anyone else's life. It's a degree, it's a small change, difference anyway. And my life, I like to talk about it in terms of reading. Not just reading, of course, but mostly reading. I don't know why I became this way, but that's just the way it is. I can tell you about things I read 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but I have forgotten large parts of my life. I can remember when we lived in Germany. This is like one of my strongest memory from that time. There was a library. It was 1 hour away. Maybe it wasn't, but that's how I remember it. There was a long bridge. In my mind, it was like 10 kilometers long. And once a week, I was allowed to go to this library alone. And I always stayed longer than I should. And I borrowed much more books than I could carry. I was never one to play outside, games, friendship, and so on. I thought, to me, books much. Thanks to books, I was in much more interesting places, other worlds even. And when we talk about literature and art, we like to talk about learning and understanding the human condition. And we look down on the fantasy part as trivial, a waste of time. And I think we should let our children be imaginative. Let them be creative, live in these silly worlds. Not because they must become writers. I certainly believe that a culture that looks down on imagination and creativity will be poorer for it. A society is not just built on farms and factories. To me, writing came later, in middle school to be exact. I think it's called middle school in most part of the world. It was class 4. By then we lived in Sweden, and we had a teacher who had high hopes for us. I later found out that his dream was to become a writer, and he gave us an assignment. Every week we had to write something, anything we wanted, poetry, novels, anything. And he would read it out loud to the rest of the class. Nobody enjoyed this exercise more than me. I wrote longer and longer texts. First it was 5 pages, and then 10 pages, and then 20 pages, and then 30 pages. In the end, It took a whole lesson, the whole hour, to read just my text. And so the teacher ended this assignment and said, continue on your own. And that's what I did. Back then, I wrote silly stories about dragons, about magic. I was just copying the books I liked back then. Normal child things, nothing special. But that's how you become better, by copying, by you start at the beginning. And that's how it began for me, a teacher passing on his dream to me. Maybe that's how all dreams begin. We get them from someone else. I never told anyone, of course, that what I wanted to be. It was too big, a stupid kid's dream. It is not possible. I'm a foreigner. I barely know this language. We had only lived for a few years in Sweden, and the whole world was telling me to stop. In high school, hmm, I used to get back my writing assignments full of red marks, and the teacher said, looked like this angrily at me, it seemed at least. I can see that you are trying, but this is not enough. Once she would ask, what language do you speak at home? And I told her the whole story, the typical migrant story. I was born in this country, and then we moved to that country, and I forgot that old language, and then we moved to this country, and then this language. At one point in my life, I even spoke Amharinia, because we lived for several years in an apartment in Germany together with Ethiopians, and they did not know Tigrinya, and it was easier for me to learn Amharinia and for them to learn Tigrinya. And that language is gone. And now I speak Arabic with my dad, bad Arabic, German with my mom, bad German, and they speak Tigrinya with my sister, and I speak Swedish with my brother. And afterwards, the teacher just nodded like this and said, yes, now I get it. Now I get it. And then she handed me the assignment, full of red marks. But it's not just what you don't have, it's also what you do have. And I will come to that later. So there was this outside, like, no, but there was also an inside no. My own voice, my mother's voice, my friends' voices telling me, you have to be serious. You will never make it. Forget it. You have to make money. You have to study. Or you're going to end up working as a cleaner. Don't waste your gifts. And there was no one to look for inspiration. There was no one that belonged to our group, not even who had gone to university in my city. And to us, we need something real. We are the people of real, cynical people, I think, because we know that the world is hard, unforgiving. We know we have to fight 10 times harder to get somewhere. So people like, how can you think so big? Education first, like the name of this program. And that was my plan. I went to university, and it actually changed my life fundamentally, I think. In a way, it was like meeting the outside world for the first time. I wanted to know about everything. I wanted to know what smart people were thinking about. I know that's not how you're supposed to study. You're supposed to just get some skills and then get a job, get married, get children. But I was interested in knowledge. Sometimes I miss that time. I think of it like the best time of my life. I was just reading books all day long. And I was not looking to find myself or anything like that. I was just reading to catch up. And I was studying at double speed, because I had to study the serious course that leads to a job, a good future. And that was, to me, political science. And I was also studying religion because I wanted to. Because back then I felt like the community I belonged to, you could say, uh, the discussion was not possible. People like to talk a lot, but they never read anything. That's how I felt. And I wanted to simply, in a way, I was looking for the truth of things. I'm not sure I found it, just a lot of theories and possibilities, but something I found in the university, and that was courage, believe in myself. And I think this part is not unimportant, self-belief. I belong here. This is not above me. There was a paper out a few years back that claimed that one factor that is holding back people who come from different backgrounds, uh, they don't look high enough. They don't ask for bigger salaries. They don't apply for higher jobs and so on. And that at a large systematical level is holding them back because they believe, this is not possible for me. So the whole group, if a whole group believes this is not possible for us, that is dangerous, at least. I don't know, terrible. Once one of the religion teachers asked me if I could recommend him a fiction book about Muslims growing up here in the West. And at the time, there was not many at all. And he also wanted it to have a religious theme that they could use in the course. And there was none. I did not know any book like that. So he asked me, why don't you write it then? Why don't you write it? That's exactly your background. And that's how it started. I wrote a book about myself, or rather, a person called Noah. I called him Noah, who goes to university, who comes from an Eritrean Muslim background. Everyone tells him, you have to be careful when you move out. Don't start with girls, don't lose your way. But he was only interested in reading. So yes, it was about me. And the second part of the book, he travels back to Eritrea with his dad and realizes it's not what he was told. And it ends with him understanding himself in a more full way. Hassan Minhaj, American comedian, I think American Indian comedian, he said that a Muslim kid, they have only one card to play in their life. Once they can do what they want. So use this card wisely. And I saved mine for this moment. After I finished my studies, I started writing. I worked part-time as a teacher and I wrote this book. My poor years. That's what I call it nowadays. And that's how it should be, I think. Of course, nobody likes this part of life, of course. It's boring, it's hard. Everyone tells you to stop. The voice in your head telling you to stop. Of course, everyone goes through periods of their life like this. I had a friend of mine who studied as a system engineer. He asked me, how do you do it? How do you deal with doubt, with rejection? He wanted to give up and just work at the car factory because he could not find a job that suited his education. And all the Swedish people in his class, they already had a job. So he started thinking, is it me? Is there something wrong with me? And if you start looking like that, you will find 1,000 faults. Well, I did not have a good answer to him because I think my way, it does not work for everyone. 5 years passed. I finished my book. I sent it out to the 2 biggest publishing houses in Sweden. At that time, you had to send the text via mail, not email, physically. And it was expensive, printing out the text, buying stamps. I could only afford 2 copies. And of course, I got rejected straight away. And I gave up also, directly, straight away. I started thinking, okay, I'll find a job. I'll do something else. But a friend of mine, he stole my manuscript and he sent it to all the other publishing houses. He did not care if they said no or not. If they said no to emails or not, he just sent it. He found on their website some email and he sent it there. And then something happened. The third biggest publishing house, they said yes. Of course, now people accept this as a deserved outcome, a normal outcome, because they look what happened and they see, it went so well for you. You deserve to get published. You won awards, you're a good writer and so on. But I think that's just life. We call it faith, qadr. Swedes, they will call it luck. Because look how what happened. My friend sent my manuscript to every publishing house in Sweden, and all of them said no. Uh, Years after my book even came out, I still was getting rejections. And but one publishing house, the third one, the third biggest, said yes. And during the meeting, they go through like hundreds of texts in 20 minutes because every year they get sent over 6,000 manuscripts, and they publish maybe one new writer a year. And during this meeting, all of them sitting there said no to my text, except one person who was a bit curious. He looked through it like, yeah, okay, maybe. But he didn't put up a fight. He said, okay, maybe you guys are right. And later, he had some time off before lunch. And for some reason, he picked up my manuscript from the garbage. One person with some time off. That's how it started. That's why I'm here today. I heard the same story from many successful people. The importance of faith or luck, if you want. They needed someone to give them a chance. And it's the same even for people working at big companies. They tell me this. They needed a shot. They needed someone to believe in them, someone who says, maybe it could be you. But I think there's also one more element to this. In football, if I'm allowed to use a football metaphor, it often looks like goals are lucky. The ball hits someone's leg and goes in. Someone makes a mistake and the match ends with 1-0 and so on. But it's interesting to me, at least, that the team that attacks the most also is the luckiest team usually. So that's what I try to tell people nowadays. Be stubborn, try, fail, and try again. That works in life and it works in writing. Anyway, my first book was about me. I believed at that time that one should write about oneself. Don't make up things. That's not what serious writing is about. Otherwise, you can just write anything. And in the beginning, my second novel, it looked like that. Lots of my own stories. The character was much like me, but I got tired of it. It seemed meaningless, no ambition. It's like eating your own heart. Soon there's nothing left to eat. Real writing, it must be something else. That's what I believe now. So I took all that away and I changed the story. And the book is called Man is the Most Beautiful City. I think that's my best work so far. A strange title for sure. It works better in Swedish. It's a line from the book. A funny side story. I was not sure actually about that title. So I asked a friend and he was like, no, this is a terrible title. Pretentious. It's like poetry. No one will want to read this book. He hated it. So that's why I kept it, because he had such a strong reaction. I thought, this must be right. I can, if now you're not going to say anything probably, but I can read the first page if anyone is interested. It's in English. It's translated. The book is about San Francisco, he's called, and his friend Jay. And it starts off with San Francisco, who lives in the in some northern country, who is getting thrown out from his apartment because he hasn't paid his bills. And it begins with him being outside buying something. You know, San Francisco, said Irma, working behind the counter. Your name is dumber than cow shit. I willed the coins in my pocket to multiply. My darlings, why have you abandoned me? You promised to stay with me until the end. 6, 7, 12. I fumbled them onto the counter. What happens when the day finally comes and you're standing on the Golden Gate Bridge and people will ask your name? You'll be talking about yourself and they'll think you're talking about the bridge. And they will think you're talking about the city. You can't be called San Francisco in San Francisco. Really? Weren't we done with this argument? The name was a gift. A friend gave it to me. The older guys in the corner sneaking the latest news from the old country to convince themselves home existed. They wanted to attack me too. Go on. Fine with me. They're not gonna let you cross the border. Why would they let why would they want to let in another rat? You're in the wrong place, San Francisco. You're in the wrong place. San Francisco, that's out west, not up here in the north. And he arrives, and suddenly the rat becomes a hero. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Sooner or later, you're going to have to be content with what you got. The way these guys aimed, you didn't have to duck. Listen, I know a village where they name kids Paris. They have a lot of Londons too, and some misters and doctors, and even an astronaut. We call them Astro for short. When kids get those kind of names, they get their parents' dreams too. It doesn't mean they have to go to that specific place. It just means they'll always carry that person who named them wherever they go. Like I said, nonsense. Where's the rest? Irma asked, counting the coins. You could tell she expected a sob story. Ah, my wallet left me, and now I'm all alone. I swear, I'll pay you back. No credit, no exceptions. It said so right in the shop window. Surely, I'm not completely illiterate. Forget the bread, I said. I'll just take the chocolate cigarettes. I returned to my apartment and found all my belongings scattered in the hallway outside. One reason, yeah, that is the first page or the first chapter, around one page. Anyway, one reason why I chose this subject was because I was influenced by the book I was reading. And at that time, I was very much interested in hobo culture. You know, that culture that started in America during the Depression? People going from town to town looking for jobs, stealing, jumping on trains, starving, living in strange places. They had it hard. They were not welcome anywhere. There were laws against them. Camps were destroyed. They were driven out. Yet the culture around it was so romantic, so much fun. For example, there is a famous singer called Woody Guthrie, and he has a song that goes, "This land is your land, this land is my land." And it was a song about adventure. And I thought, who are today's hobos? Who can I write like this about with this same kind of romantic feeling? And I thought, migrants, of course. Immigrants, migrants are today's hobos. And as you all know, people, maybe you guys don't know this, but people who come here to Sweden, at least, they like to talk about this great adventure they had coming here, the adventure of their life. They went through so much stuff, so many horrible experiences. But when they tell it, it's always with a lot of jokes and fun. For example, I have one relative. He's been trying to come to Sweden for 20 years. Every time they throw him out, his sister sends him more money, he comes back. And he tells this story by talking about all the prisons he has been in and complaining about prison food. He says, Italy is supposed to be a food country, but they only serve pasta and tomato sauce every day, nothing else. France, it was great in France. One day they give you lasagna, one day they give you baguette. And Sudan, he said, Sudan, it was terrible. Sudan, a prison in Sudan, because it's supposed to be a Muslim country, but they never give you meat on Fridays, just food. Every Friday it's food. And Norway, it was terrible, the worst country, the prisons in Norway, because they only give you pills. He said he gained lots of pounds, lots of kilos there. And that's the kind of feeling of adventure and fear and fun I was trying to write about in the book. So they have lots of trouble, but Every trouble, it just goes away. I think I was lucky to come here to Sweden during this time because there are not so many great stories left to tell. In, not only in Sweden, probably in the West in general. That's why they still write millions of books about the Second World War. Every year there's like 1,000 books about the Second World War. And for a writer, you look for great stories. And I got one for free. Suddenly, my otherness is useful, interesting. If it weren't for the fact that I'm a Muslim and Eritrean, I wonder what would I write about? Alhamdulillah. It's a strange book, a difficult book, but it went well, I think, better than I hoped. It allowed me to go to different countries. The first book, it gave me a place. This one, I think it gave me a name. So that's what I do, what I have done for 10 years now. I sit at home and write. And sometimes I go to the library and talk. But as you know, I'm still Eritrean. I have to do those things too. And since I'm our family's representative in Stockholm, I'm the only one I'm the one who has to go to funerals because my parents live in a different city. And they are at that age when they start losing a lot of people they know. It seems every 2 weeks there is a death. So every 2 weeks I go to a funeral. In Stockholm, the Muslim burial place, it's called the Forest Cemetery. It's a beautiful place with lots of trees. It's green, lots of flowers. And I noticed something. Only Eritrean come for an Eritrean wedding. There's no mixing. No Arabs, no Swedes, no Somalis. It's almost like they don't know any other people. But at weddings, it's very much different. Then everyone wants to come. Doesn't matter if you're Swede or not. But funerals, not so much. And you know how it is. There's lots of men. No one dresses up. They come directly from jobs with their taxi uniform and so on. There's no young people, just old men. There's an imam talking about life and death. And anyway, once one of these men, he came to speak to me and he said, our young people, they don't get it. They think our culture is meaningless. They don't care about traditions. And we can't explain it to them what the value is. How are we supposed to compete with everything they like? Football, friends, music, YouTube, games. And he said, we want to start an organization that is going to be focused solely on them. We have to get them back before it's too late. Because who is going to bury us when we die? They don't even know how to do it. And they don't care. And he asked me, do you want to lead this organization? Maybe you can talk to them. And the feeling I had was similar to when Khayar asked me to speak here today. He said, one of the things he said is, we want you to inspire young people. And I was like, how can I do that? They don't like books. Even when I was at their age, I didn't have anything in common with them. I'm not cool. I'm not interesting. I don't think like them. What can I offer? And well, here is how my brain works. Someone asks me a question like this, can you do this? And years later, I get a good idea. And this is something I want you to tell you people about it. It's a dream I have, a future project. Maybe one of you want to participate. Maybe, yes, I can do nothing for these kids now. I can't do that. I know that. And there's nothing I can do about that. But one day, these kids will wake up. One day they will become gray old men too, and they will want to learn about the past. This is normal. This will happen, I am sure. Not to everyone, but it will happen. And then there will be no one they can ask, no one to tell them. If you want to know about the Swedish past, there is thousands of books, all kinds of books. You can find any information. But if you try to look up books about Eritrea, there is not much. I can tell you that. At one point, I read every book that was available in English and Swedish about Eritrea. It was not very hard. Mostly, it was books about war. Some are written by Christian missionaries, and there's some few books now about the situation after the independence. But it's very hard to find something about real life. So for a young person, or when they grow old, I guess, and they start looking, they will find no meaning, no answers to questions about identity. So I wonder, where will these kids turn in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? And I think there is work that one can do here. And this is what I want to do. I want to talk to people who was born there in Eritrea, who lived there, who have experiences there, and I want to record them talking about the past, about their childhoods, about how life was, what they did on a Saturday evening, anything. What did they think about the future? How was it in school? What did they do for fun? Anything. What music did they listen to? And it must be specific, not just general talk. There has to be a sense of life. And the smaller, more focused, the better. I want to create an internet archive, a memory. So one day, when the kids will become interested in the past, there is a place they can go and learn. Because people change. They will not be forever focused on America and American culture and games and so on. They will change because one day they will have their own kids. What will they tell their own kids about their past? For example, I regret that I did not ask my parents more about the past. Now, before I thought those stories were not very interesting, but now I think those stories were fantastic. I want more stories like that. Like, I want my dad to tell me. He, for example, once told me about he went with his dad to go to the farm, and they had to walk for over an hour, and there was animals out there. They were very afraid. There was hyenas, for example. So his dad had a gun always with him, but then the Ethiopians took away the gun, so he had to carry a big knife instead. Those kind of stories. Maybe it can be used by future Eritrean writers as a source. Maybe it will just be for curious people. I don't know. Maybe it will be for researchers. But this is something I can do, at least. And maybe one of you are interested in helping. And this is all the talk I have prepared for today. Anyone who is interested is allowed to ask questions. Yeah, anything. Any thoughts? Any comments?
Sorry, I had some technical problems, so I had to move my place from and to change the connections. Therefore, I missed maybe some part of the talk. But what I have listened to, I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to look at it at the recording later on the YouTube. Uh, Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing with us those valuable comments. We have some questions with regard to Eritrean. Uh, Even though I think that I have some connection or I follow up the Eritrean around in terms of politics or education, what happened? Why we didn't get to know you from before? Are you known to the Eritreans in Sweden? What do you think the reason, if not, you are not well known and connected with the community?
You're asking why am I not known?
I feel sorry, to be honest, that we've missed a lot that we didn't get to know you from before and learn from your wisdom. Also, before that, your books, have they been translated into other words? Because we follow some other fictionists, especially in Arabic, like Haji Jabir.
There's
Yes,
there's no book in Arabic.
there are.
the translations, it works. It's a publishing house. I have no part in it.
Okay,
But the last book, it has come to several languages, Italian, for example, and French,
great.
and
English. I would.
no, there's no in English.
Okay,
It's other countries who buy the book.
okay, okay.
So there is translation in English, but it's not public. Someone has to buy it.
All
Uh,
right.
but as I can say this, I used to be active not as an Eritrean, but as a Muslim. So I was like active in a Muslim context. Uh, because to me, at least, the Eritreans, it was only Eritrean old people, those organizations. But as Muslim organizations, they were also focused on other age groups. And so I have only been active. I have only been active in Muslim context. And for the second part, I think at least in Sweden, and I don't want to sound like maybe we don't read so much. At least that's what I think. And it's not. There's another male Muslim black writer, and he talks about this too. It seems he said that if you look, the people who read, I have not reached my own people, he says. And that is maybe my fault or not, I don't know.
Not your fault solely. There are so many things that we need to figure out and uh, support one another, I guess. But this is an important moment for us to have you. And I know that many young people, when they listen and follow this topic today, especially, I hope it will create some uplifting spirit for them to pursue writing. Uh, in Eritrea, I don't know, have you visited Eritrea after the independence?
Yes, once.
Okay. And how many languages do you talk of the Eritrean, and what was the influence of those languages in your writing?
Uh, I'm usually told that I have a strange Swedish. And my wife says that sometimes when I write this strange, it's very good, and sometimes it's not very good, and I don't seem to be able to tell the difference. But she thinks when you're born in one country, and that's also what I think, by the way, you tend to have a very correct, mm, your style is very correct. So there is a risk that it becomes dull. So when you come from somewhere else, there is at least a chance that you can write something interesting. So this is not only me. There's several other writers who have come from outside of Sweden, who in this way have like given Swedish language a new life. So it's not just me. So I do think that not you could see in my writing those different uh, my background, so to speak. But it's more. The only language I speak in is Tigrinya and Arabic, if you count that. Yeah, I guess you do. So I do not know any other Eritrean languages.
Great. If someone is raising their hand, probably the admin could assist me to give them a chance.
Yes, I'd like to speak, please.
Yes, mashallah, Dr. Muhammad Khair Omar. It's pleasant to have you with us today, to be honest, and I look forward to have you on this platform in future as well. Most welcome. Yes, it's
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, it was really a great pleasure to listen to you and your experience, and it is really very interesting. It was also by chance that I knew about you. My name is Muhammad Khair Omar. I'm interested in literature. I really love literature since I was a child. I was very bookish, so reading quite a lot, and many times you feel you are alone because people don't interact with you because it is you and the book. The book is your best friend, and then you miss this social interaction also, which sometimes could be a problem. So, first of all, is my question is how do you cope with this being too much bookish and also not losing this social dimension and interacting with people? That is one. The second is, and sometimes also you feel alone, although you have people around you, but if you don't get the people who understand you or you can talk with them, this issue still be a problem. Regarding the stories you were talking about in Eritrea, for example, there are some writings. If you could give us your email, for example, here, we could supply with some. For example, one of them is, I don't know whether you know or not, but there is a German writer, Enno Littmann, the Princeton expedition, and he collected like something like 100 folk tales. I mean,
that's exactly good.
Have you read that?
No, but that's a good.
This is about the stories told to children. He has written actually 3 volumes. One is just poetry. He was writing in an area where they speak Tigray, and it has been translated to English. Very interesting, almost like 100 folk tales. How people narrated those things, and there is a collection of songs. There is a collection of poetry. I think he wrote some 3 volumes. I think that would be really very helpful. And also, do you get the chance to read these new Eritrean writers who are coming up now, like Haji Jabir, like Hamid al-Nazir? His latest novel he writes in Arabic. That could be a problem of language, but it deals with history, how people lived, and it is about a feudal lord who's living in Sahel or something, which will give you background. So if you give us your email or something, I think we can supply you with resources that at least we know about. But I think also it's important that when someone writes, your story becomes unique. That's when you become accepted. I mean, people are fed up of these Western stories, etc. They want something new. So every time you are unique, every time you are yourself, every time you have your own dimension, then I think your story becomes quite interesting. And my next question, my final remark would be, how do you get this inspiration? I mean, or at what times? I mean, different authors have different ways of getting inspired by things. I think I've talked a lot, and thank you for giving us this chance. Education First, and Abdul Qadir Badir, thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. There was a lot of things to pack there. I'm not sure I will get to everything. You can comment if I missed something, but your first question is about social adaptation, maybe I could call it that. And I can tell you that people usually think I'm weird. So I do not think I adapted very well. I became very bookish. Insensitive, you could almost say, because you live in one book world and you forget there are other rules in life. I hope I have gotten better. It was much worse before because I'm less bookish now. I used to spend like 12 hours a day reading. Because I write more now, I don't have time to read that much. So my mom always she has stories about me, like when she tries, when I'm supposed to meet someone and they don't know how I look, she tells him, look for the one with his shoelaces out. And the friend tells her later, yeah, I knew exactly who you meant. Or she tells someone, the rude person who doesn't answer your questions, talk to that person. And there's many things you could do as a bookish person to find a social context where you're allowed to talk about books. Book circles, for example. There's other people, not many, but there are. But I found usually that you're not really alone with books. There's another person, the person who wrote this, the characters in the book. So you're not really alone. That's one thing. And I can also be honest, I used to be more interested in reading about Eritrean writers like 10 years back. I used to keep up much more what was happening. And at that time, uh, I didn't know, I looked at because I'm a library person, I looked what the kind of books they had, and not just the university libraries and the normal libraries. And at that time, there was very little written by Eritreans. Uh, I'm sure things have changed since then. I hope so. And I will try to keep up with that. But it's just the last 10 years, I tried to catch up, because before I was very focused on academia. I tried to read academic writing, and the Eritrean writing was my hobby, the Eritrean reading. And since then, I tried to catch up much more with fiction writing. So I spent a lot of my time since then reading uh, what you're supposed to read, Nobel Prize winners, Dostoevsky, those kind of writers. So I haven't had time, uh, simply put. I don't know if there's. I think that was everything. I hope so.
There are some questions written. Uh, we as Eritrean have a lot of stories to be told. How do you think we can show it to the world?
This is a good question, because usually people here wonder, where are the African writers? Where are the Eritrean writers, and so on. It's why are there so few that we know about? And I think to get into a market, like to get non-Eritreans to read Eritrean stories, I don't know how to do that in an easy way, but it must start with people books getting translated. And this thing is not and sold by publishing houses, not just Eritrean translating his own book. You need a publishing house, you need the whole system, you need marketing, uh, and it's, I think even Swedish writers, Swedish publishing houses complain about this, how to get out Swedish books. But one thing they do is that Sweden as a country works on marketing Swedish literature. It's not just one person doing this or one publishing house. It's the whole country. They they do that in many ways. They invest money in to help translate books. Uh, they invest in marketing. Uh, they cooperate with other countries. They have regional awards where several countries combine to make an award for like this whole region, and that way those books get lots of much more interest and focus. For one person, I think it is very hard because you have to be really outstanding writer. It's not enough to be a good writer for people to take interest. But with resources, with energy, I think it's possible. Next.
Yeah. Also, there is another question. How did you learn about the techniques of writing?
Uh, I can say honestly, it was by failing, by
Mhm.
tr- by trying and failing, and you become better simply by you have to, it's like anything you do, you have to do it over and over again, and small changes, and in the end you can see, like, yeah, I learned a lot, but it was and also by reading, I think it is necessary to become a good reader. You To become a good writer, you have to read, and usually there is sort of like a cliche, because you need to write about something, but usually it is that a person who has a lot of stories or material, they are usually not so great with the language skills, with the technical skill. But people who are good with the technical skills, they usually, because that means they have a certain background. They come from a middle class or higher background. They went to certain universities or and so on and so on. But they don't have as much as material. So this is a paradox because either you have story but not the technical skills, or you have skills but not story. So, but I think it's just you try over and over again. For me, it took like 15 years before and they say that the average year for age of a new Swedish writer is 40 years. So it takes 40 years in Sweden.
That's a lot. I think Sister Kauthar.
مرحبا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
وعليكم السلام.
وبركاته.
وعليكم
هلا
السلام.
هلا وسهلا مرحبا. كوثر عبد الرحمن. I joined late, I'm sorry, so I'm sure I missed the first half an hour. I'm very happy to hear about this author, and I would like to thank Education First for providing us such a series on. One moment, please. One moment.
Yeah, the materials will be available, inshallah, on the YouTube. Inshallah, the people who missed the part of the lecture, they could see it full, inshallah, when it's published. And we really appreciate your presence with us, Brother Sami.
Thank you for letting me participate.
It's a pleasure. The Education First here, what we try is to address to present and address different kind of issues that we need to excel in our life. So because we missed the opportunity of settling and living in peace maybe in one country and having the usual interaction and progress, we try at least to have some form of communication and getting in touch with each other as Eritrean part of our identity and wherever we are. So we need to find a common factor, which is the Eritrean identity, and try to build on those with this connection to move on and encourage one another, as we know the issues that we face in different lives. If there are any questions, please raise your hand, and I'll try to, at the same time, to read some of the questions that we have.
Someone is saying, unmute me.
Okay, this is Kauthar again. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're back? Okay. Yes, carry on.
I'm sorry about that. All right.
Great.
All right. So anyway, what I was trying to say, I got interrupted. I'm sorry. Thank you. I would like to say thank you to Education First, because you are introducing us to new personalities, Eritrean personalities that we did not even know existed. So I would like to thank our guest today for coming, for explaining his background and about his books, and it's been great. I can't stress enough how impressed I am with, number one, your young age, and you have written so many books, and then the other one is the fact that you are very fluent in English, and you're in Sweden. Even people in the US or Canada cannot speak as eloquently as as I can hear you talk, and you're very expressive. You use very you have a very good command of the English language, so that's fantastic, I think. And I'm sure it came from a very young age, and by reading and writing, and as you said, by making so many mistakes. So kudos to you on that. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to ask a couple of questions, actually. What is the message that you're trying to give to young Eritreans in the diaspora? What is there a message that you're trying to convey, and I want to know why. And number two is, what is the things that you can do as an author, as a young man, as a talented writer, as someone who loves to read, what's the legacy you want to leave behind for young Eritreans so that they can learn from you, learn from your experiences, learn from the mistakes that you've made? So those are the things I'd like to know. And of course, you want to be useful, you want to be resourceful, you want to be of benefit to your own community, your own society as a whole, as all Eritreans. So, is there any steps that you're trying to make to make that to be that useful and that resourceful, so that others, young people, can learn from you? And that's all I have for today. And I would like to say thank you, brother. Wassalam.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Again, many questions. I will try one at a time, I guess. I hope I don't miss anything. Thank you for the comments about my English. I actually feel like I'm not very good at it, especially my pronunciation.
You are good. You are good, mashallah.
But I actually don't like, when we talk about books, I don't like books to be moral. I don't like books with clear messages, because it somehow feels demeaning to the reader that you're telling them what they should think. But of course, the reader can find, in the same way I find meaning in books, readers can find meaning in my books, readers. And to me, one thing that is important and is a sense of companionship, that you don't have to feel alone with certain thoughts, certain feelings, a certain way of looking at things. And I would rather talk in those terms, that I want someone, a young Eritrean, for example, but it doesn't have to be an Eritrean. It could be a Somalian or whatever. They will read my book and feel, because we live in a pretty crazy world. Especially, I don't know if especially, but as a person living in Sweden with different background, there's lots of pressure that comes from many directions. And I want someone to pick up a book like mine, because that's how I did it. I picked up the book and I felt like, here is someone who went through these things, and they can still write funny about it. It's not just tragedy and suffering and, oh, no one understands me. There's also just how life is. Sometimes there is like a perseverance. You can live through this. And that's one thing. And the other thing is, you could do this too. The same thing I'm doing. You pick up a book, and that's also how it was for me. I started reading and I started writing. And I want other people to do that too. It doesn't have to be my book again. It could be books in general, but I would be happy if one day I get an email from an Eritrean or Somalian or whatever, and they pick up my book and said, I started writing because of you. Because for me, it was like that. There's writers who made me think, I can do this, I want to do this. Not just I can, but I want to. And I have tried specifically on several occasions to contact Eritrean organizations, or they rather contacted me and they said, can you do something? And I said, this is what I can do. I can have writing courses. I can help people with like the skills, because I never went to a writing course. So all the mistakes, I did them by myself. There was no one to tell me, don't do this, don't do this. And I could help people so that phase goes quicker. So they can like take my lessons from my mistakes, and they don't have to do the same mistakes. But so far, I did this on 3 occasions, but so far there were so few people interested in Eritreans, but I have done the same things for Swedes. Went to writing classes, and there's never been a problem. So I don't know specifically why Eritreans are not interested. Maybe there's a problem with marketing or something, I don't know. And legacy, it's too early. I want to write a couple of books before I talk about legacy.
Very interesting comment, because there are so many good activities and good people who wants to assist our fellow Eritrean to excel, but unfortunately they tend not to participate or turn in those special and important venues, like today, for example. Okay, Brother Mahmoud.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you very much, Habib Abu Umar and Mr. Sami Said, for really it's an interesting and inspiring to us the topic, mashallah. Let me thank you, Brother Sam Said, for taking our struggle as an immigrant, as a Muslim, as an Eritrean, to the wider reader and such a multi-cultural society as a Sweden. Still, you didn't answer one of the questions that Dr. Mohammed Khair he asked. If I can remind again, what's the main inspiration for you to write about indirectly about your own story, or as an immigrant, as a Muslim, as an Eritrean, and to show to the world that, subhanallah, that how we're going through it, and this is what happened, and this is so even the multi society over there, that they can understand what we're going through. So what was the main inspiration that usually we Eritreans, I think, or even as a wider immigrant, we don't write about our own struggle in deep, in indirect message, that like what you did. Jazakallah khair.
In Sweden, when I started off, there was no one who had done what I had. There was no Eritrean, no Africans writing, no one about what it was growing up. And I thought, as a writer, you look for things that has not been done before. That gives you sort of an advantage, but you have to find a way to make it a story. It's not enough talking about your life. So one inspiration, I had tried to write a book before, and it did not go well. And I noticed that I thought maybe I have to write about the things I know. And this is my life. This is the things that I have gone through. This is the thought I have had, always in a humorous way, but basically at the root, it was about myself. It was real things. And so I think that way you can write better, I guess. You can write more, the Swedish word förtätat, deeper. You can go deeper with stories, with your own story, because you have so much more information. So that was one reason. And the other reason, besides the reason that I thought no one had done this before. And since then, it's still, there's been some Somalis, women, written about their life, but mostly it's Iranians. There's a lot of Iranians, there's some Kurds, but I think there's still lots of room for other writers like me. Many stories untold. I wish like the older generation would write a book, because it's always the young who doesn't really know how it was back then. I would like the older generation to start writing books, because I think that would be much more interesting. The young books are so predictable.
Okay, do you have any contact with other writers in English, for example?
Mostly it's just in Swedish. Those are the writers you meet up, so you become friends.
Is
So
there
not
any,
so much.
yeah, is there an Eritrean in Sweden apart from yourself who writes?
There are some Eritrean writers who want to become people who want to become writers, and they contact me. So I have some limited contact with them, trying to give the small advice I can.
I think Hawaii is rising
I just one thing. I was in a jury for literary competition, and I noticed there was many Eritreans writing, so that was something positive. There seems to be a lot of young Eritreans writing their stories.
Right. Huawei Smart.
Yes, brother Abdul Qadir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yes,
Ustad
first,
Mulukum
yes,
Amin.
small, I mean, yes, thank you.
MashaAllah. Yes.
Thank you for making it possible, first of all. Brother Abdul Qadir and education first. I would like, my comment is going to be from a parent point of view and a mother. I related to a lot what Brother Sami had to say as a mother because I had a similar character in my household. And for that, I have to say thank you very much, Brother Sam. It's a relief for me as a mother that my son could eventually make it because he shares almost an identical journey to yours. You know, sometimes similar to your mother, he was in despair, while asking him to get a job, not put some of food on the table, but never ever lost hope, and always believed in his journey and knew that one day he will make it. So I just want to say thank you very much for sharing such an incredible journey, and good luck. You are still young. We're not looking for legacy yet, more to come from you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you, Amin.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Amin, her son is about to write a book, and he went a long way. Maybe this is an opportunity for him maybe to get to know you and hopefully keep the communication going and supporting our son who's about to write and have interest in the writing. So thank you, Amin, for sharing your part, and inshallah your son will make it, will make it, and will be proud of him as well.
Be patient with him. And someone asked about Nuruddin Farah. Yes, I have read some. He came, I think he was published this year, one book in Swedish. I think I read him in English, I think, if I remember correctly. That was about someone writing something. I have not read every chat. Maybe you could, if there's something I have to answer in the chat.
And I can see, yeah, Omar is raising his hand.
So you mentioned that there were similarities between or there were parallels between what the hobo writers were writing about in America and the migrant journey that you saw and that you saw yourself and you experienced. Yes. What were some of the other writers or things that you read about that where you noticed there were a lot of parallels between our experience and their experience that maybe people wouldn't know about unless they read a lot just like you used
to? We are not, of course, the only migrant group. So, and I remember there was one writer who said that basically all migrant stories are the same. For example, many Jewish writers, you could find many things that, yeah, that's exactly what we are going through, especially during a time when they were, if you go back, when they were not as, there was not as many successful Jews as they are right now. So back then, there's many writers, like I loved Kafka, for example. I can't even mention all the Jewish writers I have read, but Kafka is a great, for example, the book Processen, I read it as a book about migration identity, the feeling that you were prosecuted from so many, and you don't even know why. So there's a Jewish writers, but there's also, I had a feeling of absurdity in my life. There was so much absurd. So I enjoyed very much absurd writers. who sort of, they don't make fun of life, but they tell about life in a humorous and how crazy life is. But there's also Sadie Smith. You probably heard of her. I loved her book, White Teeth. When it came out, I was almost annoyed because there was many chapters in that book that I had in my book. There was one chapter in her book called More British Than the British. And I had a chapter in my book that was called More Swedish Than the Swedes. And I had to take out that chapter because there was several chapters I had to take out because they were already in her book. I was very, at that time, I was like, no, if there's anything similar to my book, I have to take it out. But later you discover, there are millions book. Of course, it was a stupid thing, a vain thought, the idea that your book is so special.
By the way, this is my son Omar.
Do you want more writers? I can give you more writers.
Yes.
I love the writer called Herta Müller, a Romanian German writer, and she writes about she runs away from dictatorship in Romania, or not run away, she flees, and those books are also fantastic, where you can find lots of wisdom. Albert Camus, Algerian, French writer. So there's many writers with several identities where you can find these things you are looking for, I think. Tejo Cole, Nigerian American writer. His book Open City is very good. One of my favorite writers is called Aleksandar, I think, Hemon, a Bosnian American writer, and he writes a lot about looking back to Sarajevo, and those books are great, especially a book called Nowhere Man. As you can hear on the title already what it's about.
Thank you so much. I don't know. There are some writers that we know, and one of the writers, Haji Jabir, we have invited him before. Do you have any communication maybe with other non-writers? There are some other writers that we don't know. Maybe we are going to discover by the day. But there are some non-writer who have some achievement. Do you have any communication or exchanging the experience that you have?
Do you mean if I talk to them, or?
Yes, talking, or do you have any platform that maybe to some extent that connect you?
I don't have social media or homepages, things like that. So I have very little contact outside people emailing me, and I don't know how you would find my email since it's not public. But so sometimes, I mean, you meet people. So, but it's on that level, and usually, they tell me I have this manuscript or something like that. But it's not. It's not very long lasting.
Hopefully, in future, maybe we could see some more cooperation between you and maybe excelling even further and achieving even more what you have achieved. That's our hope for you.
I think that will happen. There's many young people, as I said, doing this.
Great. I think with that, we have to conclude our meeting for today. Thank you so much for Education First, who are working behind the scene to arrange for those meetings and supporting us on the IT aspect especially. Also, I would like to thank our guest for sharing with us these valuable comments and valuable experiences. Maybe this is a beginning of communicating with you, but inshallah, it will continue. Our communication will continue, and the exchanging ideas and learning from the wisdom that you have. Also, thank you for the attendees today. Before we finish, I would like to give you a minute or so if you have anything to bring forward.
I enjoyed this program very much. I did not even know it existed. I usually complain about this, that we don't have any real networks. We only meet for trivial talks. There's I have several times wanted I should start this program by myself, but I always, nah, no one will come. It will just be me. There's no point to this. So I thank you for existing.
Thank you so much. I think we need to do more in marketing, because what we think is when we tell people about this program, they give us valuable comment and feedback. But maybe it's a failure, maybe into getting the more public, more people, more of the audience to get to know that this program exists, because this is the 16th lecture that we have, and most of them are available on the channel Education First. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone, and we look forward for the next meeting. If you want to say anything, Brother Sami?
No, assalamu alaikum. That's
Wa
I have
alaikum
nothing.
assalam. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and we see you next Friday, inshallah.